Go to your kitchen right now and open your pantry. Look all the way in the back, past the spices you never use, past the half-empty boxes of cereal. Chances are there is a bottle sitting there. It might be white, it might be the color of apple cider, or it might be a dark, rich balsamic. It's vinegar. You probably use it to clean your coffee maker, or maybe you splash a little bit on a salad. It is so common, so cheap, and so incredibly ordinary that we treat it like background noise in our daily lives. But what if I told you that this sour, pungent liquid sitting forgotten in your cabinet is actually one of the most powerful and important accidents in the history of human civilization? What if I told you that without this exact bottle of liquid, the Roman Empire might not have conquered the world? Or that it was used by plague doctors to cheat death during the darkest times in human history? Or that ancient samurai warriors drank it before going into battle? This isn't just a story about a condiment. This is the story of a 10,000-year-old mistake that accidentally changed the world. Let's rewind the clock. Way back. We are going back roughly 10,000 years to the time of the ancient Babylonians. Picture this: someone, somewhere, is making a batch of wine. They leave it out a little too long. The air gets to it. The bacteria get to it. And when they finally go to take a sip of their delicious, sweet alcoholic drink, they are hit with a sharp, burning, intensely sour taste. By all logic, they should have spit it out and thrown the whole batch away. It was ruined. It was spoiled. The French word for vinegar is vinaigre, which literally translates to sour wine. But the ancient Babylonians were incredibly resourceful people. They didn't just throw it away. They realized that this sharp, acidic liquid had a completely different kind of magic to it. They noticed that if you put food into it, the food didn't rot. In a world with no refrigerators, no ice boxes, and no electricity, figuring out how to keep food from going bad was a matter of life and death. This spoiled wine was a natural preservative. Suddenly, you could store vegetables, fruits, and meats for months, surviving the brutal winters and devastating famines. But they didn't stop at food. The Babylonians started looking at this liquid as a medicine. They flavored it with herbs, mixed it with spices, and used it to clean wounds and heal infections. They didn't know about bacteria or germs, nobody did back then, but they knew that if you got cut and washed it with this sour wine, you were much less likely to die from an infection. From that single, happy accident, a global obsession was born. Let's travel forward a few thousand years to ancient Egypt. The Egyptians took this accidental discovery and elevated it to an art form. They were brewing vinegar from dates, figs, and barley. But the most legendary story about vinegar in ancient times belongs to none other than Cleopatra, the last active ruler of the Ptolemaic kingdom of Egypt. The story goes that Cleopatra made a bet with the Roman general Marc Antony. She bet him that she could consume a fortune, millions of sesterces, in a single meal. Marc Antony, looking at a typical banquet table, thought this was impossible and took the bet. When the time came, Cleopatra sat down at the table. She didn't order mountains of expensive exotic foods. Instead, she asked her servants to bring her a single glass of strong vinegar. She then took off one of her earrings. But this wasn't just any earring. It was one of the largest, most priceless pearls in the entire known world. She dropped the giant pearl into the glass of vinegar. And then, she waited. Now, if you remember your high school chemistry, pearls are made of calcium carbonate. Vinegar is acetic acid. When you put the two together, a chemical reaction happens. The acid slowly begins to dissolve the calcium carbonate. Cleopatra sat there as her priceless pearl fizzed and bubbled, completely dissolving into the sour liquid. When it was entirely melted, she picked up the glass and drank it down in one gulp. She won the bet. She had just consumed a fortune in a single drink. Whether this story is entirely fact or a bit of historical exaggeration, it shows just how central this acidic liquid was to ancient life. It was a tool, a party trick, and a symbol of power. But if we really want to talk about power, we have to talk about the Romans. When you picture the Roman army, you probably imagine shining armor, iron swords, massive shields, and brilliant military strategy. You think of them marching across Europe, North Africa, and the Middle East, conquering everything in their path. But the secret fuel of the Roman military machine wasn't just discipline or steel. It was a drink called Posca. Posca was a mixture of water and vinegar. That's it. Why on earth would the most powerful army in the world drink water mixed with vinegar? Because ancient water was incredibly dangerous. If you were a soldier marching through a foreign land, drinking from a random river, stream, or well was basically a gamble with your life. The water was often filled with deadly bacteria, parasites, and diseases. Entire armies throughout history have been wiped out not by enemy swords, but by dysentery from drinking bad water. The Romans figured out a life hack. If you poured a hefty dose of vinegar into your drinking water, it killed the bacteria. The high acidity made the water safe to drink. But it did more than just purify the water. The vinegar provided a tiny boost of calories and electrolytes, much like a modern-day sports drink. It quenched thirst significantly better than plain water, especially under the blazing hot Mediterranean sun. Every single Roman soldier carried a flask of Posca. It was so important to their daily survival that it was practically an offense not to have it. When Jesus of Nazareth was being crucified, the Bible notes that a Roman soldier offered him a sponge soaked in vinegar. For centuries, people interpreted this as a cruel joke, an act of torture to give a dying man spoiled wine. But modern historians look at this differently. That soldier was likely offering his own canteen of Posca. It was a standard-issue thirst quencher. The Roman Empire literally marched on a foundation of spoiled wine. Without it, they couldn't have traveled as far, fought as hard, or survived the brutal conditions of ancient warfare. But the story of vinegar gets even darker, and even more fascinating, when we enter the Middle Ages. Europe was being ravaged by the bubonic plague, the Black Death. It was an apocalyptic time. People were dying by the millions, and nobody understood why or how to stop it. Panic was everywhere. But in the midst of this unimaginable horror, a legend was born in France. The legend tells the story of four thieves. During the height of the plague, when everyone was terrified to even go near a dead body, these four men were going from house to house, robbing the graves and the bodies of the plague victims. They were touching the dead, breathing the air, and handling the infected clothing. Yet, miraculously, none of the four thieves ever got sick. Eventually, they were caught by the authorities. The judge was so baffled by their survival that he offered them a deal. He would spare them from being burned at the stake if they revealed their secret. How were they surviving the plague? The thieves confessed. They said they were surviving by washing themselves and soaking their face masks in a special concoction. It was a strong vinegar infused with a specific blend of herbs: garlic, rosemary, thyme, sage, and lavender. This recipe became known as Four Thieves Vinegar. Word spread like wildfire. Soon, doctors all across Europe began using it. You know those terrifying plague doctor masks? The ones with the long, creepy bird beaks. Those beaks weren't just for looking scary. They were designed to hold sponges soaked in Four Thieves vinegar. While they didn't understand the science of germs or fleas carrying the plague, they weren't entirely wrong. The strong herbs and the acetic acid in the vinegar acted as a primitive bug repellent, keeping the plague-carrying fleas away. It also acted as a harsh antibacterial wash. Once again, this simple, sour liquid was standing between humanity and absolute destruction. And it wasn't just Europe. Over in Asia, vinegar was gaining a completely different kind of reputation. In Japan, the legendary samurai warriors, known for their incredible physical discipline and unmatched fighting skills, believed that vinegar was the ultimate health tonic. They drank samurai tonics made from rice vinegar to increase their strength, boost their energy levels, and recover from intense training and battle injuries. They understood, centuries before modern science, that there was something deeply restorative about this liquid. Today, modern science actually backs this up. We now know that vinegar helps the body absorb calcium, stabilizes blood sugar, and aids in breaking down lactic acid after intense physical exertion. The samurai weren't just relying on superstition, they had found a genuine biological advantage. So, what exactly is the science here? How does a simple mistake of leaving wine or cider out in the air turn into a miracle liquid? It all comes down to a tiny, microscopic workforce and something slightly gross-sounding called the mother. When you crush apples for cider, or grapes for wine, yeast naturally eats the sugars in the fruit and turns them into alcohol. That's step 1. But if you leave that alcohol exposed to the open air, a specific type of airborne bacteria called Acetobacter invites itself to the party. These bacteria absolutely love alcohol. They consume the ethanol and convert it into acetic acid. This acetic acid is what gives vinegar its sharp, biting smell and taste. As these bacteria work, they bind together, creating a cloudy, stringy, web-like substance that floats in the liquid. This cloudy web is known as the mother of vinegar. It looks a little strange, almost like a floating piece of cobweb, but it is entirely harmless. In fact, it is the most nutritious part. The mother is packed with friendly probiotics, enzymes, and beneficial bacteria. For thousands of years, brewers would take the mother from a good batch of vinegar and drop it into a new barrel of wine or cider to jumpstart the process, keeping a continuous chain of vinegar alive for generations. When you buy a bottle of perfectly clear, transparent vinegar from the supermarket today, it has been heavily filtered and pasteurized. The mother has been killed and removed so it looks pretty on the shelf. But historically, humans consumed the raw, unfiltered stuff, drinking in all those complex probiotics that aided their digestion and kept their immune systems strong. As the centuries rolled on, human civilization modernized. We invented refrigeration to keep our food from rotting. We discovered antibiotics and modern medicine to fight off infections. We created advanced water purification systems so we didn't have to carry flasks of acid just to stay hydrated. With all of these incredible modern advancements, you would think that vinegar would fade away into the history books. You would think it would be remembered as a quirky primitive tool that we outgrew. But it didn't fade away. It adapted. Instead of saving us from the plague or fueling armies, it retreated into the culinary world. It became the secret weapon of chefs all over the globe. It is the backbone of the perfect vinaigrette in France. It is the crucial ingredient that gives sushi rice its distinctive, slightly tart flavor in Japan. It is what gives barbecue sauce its deep, tangy kick in the American South. It never lost its utility. It just changed its job description. So, the next time you open your pantry and see that cheap plastic bottle sitting in the back, don't just see a dressing for your salad or a way to decale your kettle. Look at it for what it truly is. You are looking at the liquid that hydrated the conquerors of Rome.